Okay, so this is the seventh dialogue of the series. And I work with the Open Geospatial Consortium, OGC, with the innovation program, where I am a Europe director for the innovation program. I'm very involved in GEO, where I am representative of OGC at the program board, and I co-chair the GEO Infrastructure Development Task Team and the Data Sharing and Data Management Principal Subgroup, who is co-organizing this series. Prior to that, I was working with the French Weather Service, and so I have a degree in meteorology and a degree in computer sciences, trying to develop information system and facilitate the access to information to develop science. So some house rules, please, if you are not speaking, mute your microphone to avoid any background noise. You can ask questions and make comments anytime in the chat during the presentations. And if you want to intervene, you can raise your hand under the reactions and wait for the moderator to give you the floor. And please enjoy this series. You will see that it's always a great discovery. So today, as said, I will be your host. We will have an introduction to the open knowledge statement and focus of the current dialogue by Bente Liliaby. And then we will have a presentation from Marcus Konkol. You will understand why we are so thrilled and happy to have Marcus on board here. Then a presentation from Renata Avila from the Open Knowledge Foundation. And you will also see after Bente Liliaby why we are so happy to have you on board, Renata. And then from Kenneth Mabua from Digital Earth Africa, to see how open knowledge is approached in one of the GEO region. And of course, all these are openings to stimulate the discussions, because it's also a way to engage with the audience and learn about you all. So Bente Liliaby, my partner to organize that, has been a member of the GEO community since 2004 as a research director of the Norwegian Mapping Authority. And she has been engaged as a representative in the plenary, in many committees. She has contributed to the GEO work program, so she also knows a lot about GEO, and she has been involved in several Norwegian authorities. You will be able to see all her commitments going from gender balance, equality, inclusion, to organization and data sharing and capacity building development. Bente, the floor is yours, if you want.
Thank you so much, Marie-Françoise, for that introduction. And I will share my screen with you. Let me see, and I will do it like this. And you see it full screen, right? Yes, so I will introduce the overarching, the subject of today. And before I do that, I will go straight to the definition of open knowledge. And as Marie-Françoise said, you will understand why we are super excited to have the Open Knowledge Foundation with us today, because we have been using this definition of open knowledge when we developed the open knowledge statement for GEO, actually. So what does it say? It says open knowledge is any content, information, or data that people are free to use, reuse, and redistribute without any legal, technological, or social restriction. So that's the overall statement, you can say, that we created the GEO statement on, and we tailored that to GEO. Now, a little bit of history on how this came about for GEO, because we started with open data sharing and the data management principles, but we found that knowledge is key, and therefore, and actually it started first with open science to be included as a part of the strategy for results-oriented GEOs and the GEO Knowledge Hub. And then here is the second reason why we are excited to have Marcus with us today, Marcus Konkol, because he was leading the development, the drafting team from the capacity development working group. We had a team set out from that one. And the reason why we started with the capacity development working group was due to the importance of open science to capacity building, particularly in developing countries. And that's also why we are happy to have someone who knows several developing countries in Africa, Kenneth, with us today to see more concretely what that means. So after the revisions and iterations, we then landed on the open knowledge statement. And the open knowledge, and just a word on why it's not only open science, it is considered to be more closely aligned with the GEO mission and vision, which aim to support decision making, and not only or primarily science. So that's why it's open knowledge. And the statement provides a rationale and impetus for the open context of activities of the GEO work program and the GEO community at large, and the results of which will then be made accessible through the GEO Knowledge Hub. So you might have seen this before. The knowledge statement consists of 11 bullet points. Today we will discuss more the overarching, you know, that's the title of today. But here you see the 11 bullet points. So open science, open access, citizens and participatory science, open data, open reproducible research, open software, open infrastructure, open hardware, open education, open evaluation, and diversity of knowledge. And we have covered so far, we have covered all of these, except next week we will have the diversity of knowledge also, going into depth on that. And I can only recommend you join us next Friday on the 6th of October to learn from the Indigenous Alliance, members of the Indigenous Alliance on the diversity of knowledge. But today we are, and that's why I was a little bit elaborate on the first part, because we are discussing the overarching goals of open science. And you got some of the answers already, I think, in the introduction there. So what exactly is this? So we have all these bullet points, but the overarching goals that you will find in the GEO Open Knowledge statement is the following. So the openness in knowledge generation can help address society's local, regional, and global needs by creating an inclusive and interconnection environment. A thoughtfully designed open and participatory environments provide more equitable opportunities and chances for all to gain academic literacy and benefit from new knowledge and innovation. The digitalization area offers new possibility to improve timely, equal access to knowledge, increasing the credibility and trust of academic findings and political decisions that are expected to be based on verifiable facts. We want to achieve these objectives by providing the appropriate conditions to meet high scholarly standards while actively eliminating the barriers that stand in the way of practicing open knowledge. For examples, with the help of the GEO Knowledge Hub. So that is the overarching goals of open knowledge in the knowledge statement. And we will then highlight that in the common presentations, as we are so lucky to have representatives from along that whole chain of developing this statement. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bente. So I forgot to mention that you will have some polls. If you are familiar with the dialogues, you know about that. And the question we have asked during Bente's presentation was, are you familiar with the GEO Open Knowledge? And we had 38% saying, yes, I was involved in developing and implementing them. I have heard about them. No, but I want to learn more about them. So this is the goal of this series, to develop the outreach and help everyone engage with GEO. So the next speaker is Marcus Kunkel. So now you know why we are thrilled to have you, because the two slides that Bente has presented with your name, Marcus, and mentioning the definition from the open knowledge. We have used them in each of the single dialogue we have introduced. So this is why now we are very happy to introduce everyone. We know you, Marcus. The floor is yours. And you can introduce a bit better if you want.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me to this dialogue series. I was very happy to hear that this is still ongoing and that there are some follow-up activities based on the open knowledge statement. During the time of developing the open knowledge statement, I was ITC's open science officer. So I did a bit of consulting, how to implement open science principles and how to apply them in a researcher's daily work. But currently, I'm not at ITC anymore. I'm a research software engineer at a not-for-profit company called 52 North, which is a software development company for geospatial data infrastructures. But we still follow or try to follow open science principles as much as possible. So I haven't switched to the dark side, but I'm now applying open science principles instead of developing policies, which is also a very interesting task. Anyway, thanks again for inviting me to this dialogue series. I just want to say a few words about how we developed that statement and which aspects were very important during the development and how we got feedback, stuff like that. So it's basically about the road to the GEO statement on open knowledge. And one of the biggest changes during the process is actually visible already on that slide, because as Bente already mentioned, it was not called open knowledge statement at the very beginning, but I think it was until the very last revision of the statement, it was still called the open science statement. But then we decided to change that to open knowledge statement. And I will also mention a bit why this makes sense. All right. So the statement basically starts with a bit of introduction, and it's quite important to say why such a statement is actually needed and why it's important to endorse open knowledge and all these open science principles. Because what is often missing are these success stories. So why is open science actually important? Why is it beneficial? Who can benefit from open science principles? And we've seen during the last few years, during the pandemic, for example, but also during climate change, that the sharing of knowledge is very important and crucial to tackle challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and stuff like that. And I would also like to focus a bit on the last statement that you can see on the slide. So we, the group on Earth observation, advocate the adoption of open knowledge. Because it's always important to make that very clear in such a statement, because otherwise researchers are always a bit like, yeah, I would like to follow open science principles, but my supervisor doesn't support it, or my university doesn't support it, or the funder doesn't support it. There are many excuses, so it's good to have one clear statement on why, on who is actually supporting that and endorsing it, and being able to refer to such a statement is always a very good argument. So the entry point to the development of the GEO statement on open knowledge was basically the UNESCO recommendation on open science. What you see here is a picture from the recommendation that was released by the end of 2021. It was actually the final version of the recommendation. But what we used at the very beginning when we started developing the open knowledge statement, that was by the end of 2020, it was an older version of the recommendation. But the overall structure is actually the same. But as you can see here already in this picture is that there are many aspects who play an important role in open science. And it's not just about, for example, open access publications. Because if you ask people, so what is open science? What do you understand open science to mean? Then many people say, okay, open access to scientific publications. Maybe some people say, okay, also open access to data. So open data, but then it's getting a bit fuzzy. So many people do not mention, for example, open access to software, to open educational resources, to the diversity and knowledge and stuff like that. But these things are considered in this recommendation on open science, which is also why it was a very useful starting point for our statement. And Yeah, it does not only focus on the most important or the most common open science practices, but also to the other aspects. So, for example, technical aspects like reproducibility, software, but also societal issues, such as the engagement of societal actors and the diversity of knowledge. And yeah, it was also a bit the goal to shift the attention from the paper as the main research outcome in science to the other outputs that are also relevant. So you cannot write a paper without data, and you cannot write a paper without analyzing the data. So it's also important to have access to these materials for others to reproduce the results, to verify them, to have transparent access, to understand them, and stuff like that. And this is the reason why we use this recommendation as a starting point to developing the recommendation on open science. All right, so we considered several aspects like open access to scientific publications. Open access can be implemented in different ways. So you have journals that ask very high article processing charges for publishing scientific publications. But it's always recommended to look for diamond journals that do not charge a fee and are still, yeah, often still have a high reputation. So if you look at the editorial board of some diamond journals, then you will find some very good people there. But yeah, the positive side is that you don't need to pay very high article processing charges. So open science can also stimulate public engagement and the contribution of actors beyond the scientific community, and also to achieve a higher representation of the society and also build up science literacy. And this is why it makes sense to call this statement not just open science statement, but open knowledge statement, because it's not just for researchers, but it's also for industry, for decision makers, for the public, and so on. Yeah, so we also considered all these other aspects like open data, which should be released under an open license, first of all, and also released ideally using open data formats. But it should also follow the FAIR principles, but also principles such as the CARE principles, which is important when it comes to working with indigenous people, and the trust principles, which is important when it comes to repositories to store the data. It was also like a bit like a personal goal to include open reproducible research, because it's not just about having access to materials, but also being able to reproduce them, because if you can reproduce the results, then you can also reuse them. And this is also why the use of open software is so important, because if you're using commercial software, then it's impossible for many to reproduce the results. Plus, you don't have access to the underlying source code, so you cannot understand how the statistics were implemented. Open infrastructure is also an important aspect, because it's quite easy to ask people to publish open reproducible research, open data and stuff like that. But if they don't have the infrastructure to do so, then we immediately run into serious problems. Something that is always often forgotten is open hardware. So also hardware should be openly available, which does not mean that everyone has access to a concrete physical device, but at least the documentation of that device should be publicly available and openly accessible. Open education and teaching is also very important, as it is with open evaluation, which means like stuff like open peer review. So the peer review process should be also transparently available. And finally, the diversity of knowledge holders and producers such as indigenous people. All right, so the overarching goal of this statement was to make a step towards making open science the new norm in research and across disciplines. And everyone should be able to transparently access scientific results and to be able to understand them, but also to verify them. So if the results reported in the paper are actually the same as you get from reproducing the results by using the same source code and the same data. And it's also very important to pave the way for reusability. The process for writing the statement, so I mentioned already that we started with the UNESCO recommendation for open science as an entry point. We also checked some existing open science statement. There was, for example, this joint appeal for open science by WHO and other organizations. So we checked how they understand open science. The statements were rather short and not very concrete, but this is what we try to achieve in the open knowledge statement. We also collected materials from the facilities of the co-authors. So you saw on the first slide that there was quite a long list of co-authors. Bento was also one of them, and that was very helpful. So I got a lot of feedback for the drafts, and we, first of all, internally revised the document and incorporated the feedback iteratively. And then we presented the article, the first draft to the program board. Then we got feedback. We included the feedback into the document. We revised it and then handed it in again to the executive committee, where we also got feedback and then had another iteration. Plus, we got also feedback from the data working group. And finally, we presented the document at the GEO Symposium, where it was finally approved, and now it's publicly available, and there you can see the final version of the document. So that was it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And this is great because, as you say, open knowledge is not only open data, or not only open software, or not only open science. And what we can see in the results of the poll is that in the audience, people implement most of them, except, well, open infrastructure, we have a small bug here, so it's 25%, except open hardware. Even if when we organize the dialogue, we could find a very good speaker on this topic, and we could see that it is also something to consider. What we try to develop with these dialogues is also a mindset to people to think from the start of the development why they will be able to share. And it's not only software, not only data, it can be more. And if they think about it from the start, maybe we will get more people involved in this approach. So I will give the floor to Renata, who is an expert for us on open knowledge, also another one. And you will see that Renata has a background of lawyer. So I will let you introduce yourself, Renata. But what we can see is that open knowledge is not only the garden for technical people. It can involve all type of background. And I hope that this will be, I'm sure it will be very clear after your presentation. You can take the screen. Maybe you have to let the screen, Marcus, first.
Since we want to take this opportunity to have a dialogue, I will be like very, very, very brief, but I have to say that in these times, you know, when we open any newspaper, when we have any conversation, all is tragic and all is apocalyptic, and there's so many wars going on, so many political instability and greed and pollution and bad things happening. But the conversation that I am having here today is something that helps my discipline of hope, of hope that we are in the right track to make things better, and hope in humanity in general. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. So the thing that I will quickly talk today, because I want to hear from you, is these overarching goals of open knowledge. I don't think that the goals had changed from the moment 20 years ago when Open Knowledge Foundation was founded in Cambridge. But I think that they are only getting more concrete, more real, more applicable to our daily life, and more necessary than ever when we think about any institution that we are shaping. When in the Open Knowledge Foundation, since the last year, the way that we are thinking of it is open knowledge as a design principle of every institution, every effort, every project that we are engaged in. And so it builds well with the statement that you issued and with the previous conversation, because again, is not only opening the data, is not only opening a piece of this ecosystem, is designing with openness in mind, and then deploying with openness in mind. And what is the goal? Why open? It's not only open for the sake of open. We have seen how open just for the sake of open had led in the past 20 years of an accumulation of power that didn't take into account fundamental issues. So when we think about open knowledge, at the Open Knowledge Foundation, we think of specific goals we want to achieve with this. The first is to fix knowledge inequalities in the world. I think that's the most important thing, but without replicating exploitation and extractivism. And there have been, like, you know, in the past years, dynamics of communities that extract, and then you do not see the impact of the contributions of the community then are later closed, and big tech companies benefit from it, or bad actors benefit from it. So our goal is to fix knowledge inequalities, but to avoid or to try to mitigate the risks of replicating cycles of what you have heard the term data extractivism, or unfair exploitation of people. And ultimately, one of the strongest goals is to advance people's rights: right to know, right to access information, right to education. And by adopting open knowledge as a design principle, we can achieve those better, and we can achieve those faster. The other thing that we are seeking, one of our goals, is to reduce frictions, to accelerate, and so we can unlock the technology of our times to solve the problems of our times. Some of the things that our current system of knowledge protection, we have seen it very clearly and loud with the COVID crisis. It took days to develop the solutions. It took months to clear all the frictions that those solutions had to be delivered to the people that need it. Some of them, if we look at the case of the vaccines, for example, at the example of how broken the system of sharing knowledge is, and how we are operating an infrastructure that is blocking the possibilities of knowledge to achieve maximum impact. If we think of the problems happening right now, we need open knowledge again as a design principle to deploy them fast, and to deploy and to let them localize, so we can solve things like, for example, the problem of energy, the problem of the accelerated collapse of many infrastructures everywhere because of the climate crisis, and so on. The other, and it is something that was brought up in the previous presentation as well, one of our goals is to bring people together. It's not about tech for the sake of tech. It's not about data for the sake of data. Open knowledge is an invitation for people to work together with a clear goal, and to work together with a set mindset and a set of principles that is common. When you design something with open knowledge, it invites participation and collaboration. It invites borderless collaboration. That is something quite amazing, and it is so many times this code is not necessarily a license or a piece of code, but is this code of honor between people on doing the things for a common good. It also connected to this is one of the goals of open knowledge is sustainability. Not only for the planet, but for the communities working on it. It's like, you know, the basic expression of this will be like, do not reinvent the wheel, or do not waste the resources in an already, like, you know, time where resources should be optimized, and people should, the brilliant minds working on all these topics, it should be allocated to new things so we can build upon each other. By unlocking the knowledge, we are assisting, let's say, two ways of sustainability: to not to pay twice for the same thing, but not to waste resources and time for the same thing. And ultimately, we will be like helping the planet. Generativity as well. That's another of the goals of open knowledge. So we can activate the creative power of individuals and communities by removing the barriers and by issuing this invitation, work together, new things, surprising things happen. It's the serendipity of opening knowledge. And the other goal that we are seeking is that it's something that it doesn't need to be like global. It not all has to scale to be like, like exported from or scaled from a reality from my country, Guatemala, to the reality of England. What we believe is that open knowledge needs to be rooted in the local. But what we advocate when we advocate one of our goals is that even if it's super local knowledge, we are seeking that it will be interoperable with other and open to the possibility of collaboration and interoperability with other pieces elsewhere. And then all of this leads, and that's one of the goals, of exponential impact, of spreading the benefits of all these characteristics, of all these goals that I explained. And how are we doing it in Open Knowledge Foundation? We are doing it in a very similar way as this community is doing it, with literacies, with communities, local communities, global communities, thematic communities, with the standards and with tools. And open knowledge as a verb, as action, is multidimensional. It means resources. It means feedback loops as well. It means a constant and active. It's not something that is passive. It's something that is in constant movement. And it is something that, again, it cannot be like, alone. It involves communities. It involves accessible tools. It involves a cycle of innovation and a cycle of co-creation. Last, and I hope that I didn't exceed my time, I was asked to be very, very, very quick. Here's my contact details if you want to reach out. And of course, I'm staying here for the conversation. That's the most important part for me of this dialogue.
Thank you very much, Renata. So I went a little bit fast on your presentation, but you're involved in many program boards and committees and so on. So we thank you very much to advocate that, because we are also idealists, but it's not an ideal. I think we can implement that, we can reach, and this is what we are pushing. And you will see with the presentation. Well, first I will share the results of the poll. So did you know about the Open Knowledge Foundation? So 58% knew about it, 25% didn't know, but they're interested, 8% know, and 8% they're not sure, but maybe they just heard about it. So quite a lot. You have a good shining in this community, Renata. So I think this is great. And what you will see with the presentation, next presentation from KM, as you know, GEO is global. And the works are organized through a work program. And we have GEO regions, 4 GEO regions: Asia, AmeriGEO, EuroGEO, and AfriGEO. And Kenneth here is representing Digital Earth Africa. And you will see how this concept of open knowledge, and specifically open education, we could see in the last symposium we organized about open knowledge, that open education and open assessment, open evaluation are very important. And Ken comes with this background, but he will tell how open knowledge is implemented in Africa. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good morning, depending where you're from. So I'm Kenneth from Digital Africa, and just on the building up on that is that Digital Africa program is also built on the openness in terms of open access. It's built on the Open Data Cube, and also we are providing free data for the whole continent so that we unlock the promise of tomorrow from the patterns of the past. So most of our stakeholders, government, universities, media, the young people, everyone, leaving no one behind. And we working with partners across the continent so that we can have the footprint in the 55 countries. So the program has actually co-developed some of the products and services with the partners across the continent so that we develop what is fit for purpose in terms of coming up with cloud-free mosaics, cropland, water observation from space. And recently we had a product on coastline covering 38 countries. So our governing principles are more of providing access in terms of accountability, diversity and inclusion, and finally open and free data, and more specifically that this is data for public good, access to everybody, the co-development of the products and services that I mentioned earlier on, and also the trainings that we've developed, which are free and open. We co-develop with the partners in the continent, and we have them in English and French in terms of diversity. And also we are actually now moving now towards supporting the universities in terms of supporting update of curriculum. So also our program Digital South Africa is part of the GEO Knowledge Hub so that our work can be findable, accessible. You can actually learn more from some of the use cases and impact stories that we published, and you can refer to some of the works in terms of the even a PDF, shapefile, etc., etc. So the program is now 3-4 years since 2019, and earlier on we started as a pilot program for 1-2 years. We were able to convince our development partners, this is Australian government, Helmsley Trust, and other partners in the continent to actually come in and support based on the impact stories that we've been able to showcase and document together with the partners in the continent, from coastlines, from agriculture, food security, looking at also management of natural resources, and including even a recent story on how we can use Earth observation for conservation, the story of reforming of giraffes in Kenya. So the program has continued in terms of reaching out to various persons in the continent in terms of providing the training in English and French. And also then we had COVID 2020, so we had to diversify and we had to go online, connecting everybody. And also we developed weekly sessions, which we call live sessions in English and French, trying to bring the users on board and try to understand the needs so that there's actually co-development with the platform that we have. So the platform is accessible as well in 2 levels so that we have users from any level to access and build up on technical persons later on. Also, our program is also following the principles of diversity and inclusion, realizing that we left the youth behind. We've been deliberate in supporting some of the programs like Africa Women in GIS Initiative, virtual, to support women in science and STEM in this field. Also, we are working closely with the youth mappers, where we had a technical challenge in terms of various countries with the youth mapper chapters connected, and we had final runners up from Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Malawi, and Tanzania, which was very useful so that we could support that last mile of reaching out to the decision makers, because some of these people one day will be the future leaders and be in senior positions in government or even the next president of a country. So the capacity development in terms of co-development and co-design, I was very happy to hear about the ITC because we worked actually with them to develop the capacity development strategy from 2019 in terms of the learning and in terms of how we could actually work with different partners in the continent, and even a learning platform which is open as well, which is OpenEDX. So this means that any user can access on the internet in English and French materials. We also have recorded videos as well as tutorials so that we have self-paced work. And also the engagements with the youth mappers and the other youth has been that a condition for them for engagement is to actually come and try the courses and have a certificate of completion, which adds actually to their resume. So special credit actually to the partners who've helped us work. We have the Regional Center for Mapping in Kenya, serving East Africa. We have Agreement for Niger, serving ECOWAS region. We have our host, South Africa National Space Agency in the south. We have Afrigis in Nigeria and Observation Sahel in Tunisia and Centre de Survie Ecologie in Senegal. So some of the engagements as a wrap up has been deliberate now to actually work with the universities. For example, University of Joburg, we've had an interaction with the professor who's actually working on formulating on what is happening on the Green Wall initiative in the Sahel region. So here we are doing like simulation of forecasting of vegetation the next 3 months. So someone in South Africa actually working in the West Africa, then also working with the Makerere University in terms of their programs. And finally, we had also engagements at AfriGeo, where we had a session on youth to actually get the engagements, and even having senior level people like the executive director or the level of permanent secretary in Namibia being part of such a session, and also the African Union. So more as we look at more open science, is to actually connect more with the policymakers so that they're part of the last mile in terms of decision making. And finally, we have this particular engagement now to support the internship process, like recent engagements in Tanzania, Zanzibar, where we are supporting the students across 2 months training. They have gone through the Digital Africa platform in terms of open data, open training, and they have gone through the learning platform, and they already have completed some of the courses. And as part of this internship, they've even gone to the field, collect more information in terms of citizen-generated data, in terms of the mangroves, and document some of the restoration areas, and actually now go back to the platform and validate some of the results that they're getting. So it means Digital Africa platform has followed some of those 8 principles, and trying to actually learn more from other programs so that we can actually connect more with partners across the continents and contacts. And all these sessions are only possible through the partnerships on the continent. Here are the partners that we continue to work with, and also we're looking forward to grow these numbers so that we are more sustainable for the next last mile as we help countries achieve Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the African Agenda 2063, as well as the national development priorities of each country, leaving no one behind. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ken. So I think that this was a great third presentation to show how, because when we talk about open data or open knowledge, we share because we want to find an audience, people who will use and reuse. And here you have presented the value chain, how open education and developing skills can connect the politicians, the scientists, the science, the data, and the youth at the level of a continent. So distributed through very different countries, including via different languages. It was also very interesting that you highlight that. I make a connection with the previous dialogue series that was about data management principles. And when you want to share data, you have an encoding. And here the knowledge is also some type of data, and you have an encoding. And the encoding here is the language and the way you share this knowledge. And so this was interesting to see that. I will have some questions about that maybe, but we will first go through the results of the poll. So the question we asked while you were listening to Ken was, do you use open data as means to support SDG implementations? So connecting the policies and the data. And we had yes for 91%, not yet, but I will do, and no. No, nobody answered no. So meaning that yes, open data is very important to open knowledge. I will check the chat. Do we have any questions? So we have a link about Digital Earth Africa, and a question from Yonel to Renata. So Renata, Yonel says in the chat.
Yes. I will give 2 examples, and actually I want to give the hard examples, not the easy example. There's a lot of positive examples. I want to give the hard examples when it is hard to open knowledge, or how hard to sustain open knowledge. One of the examples when it's hard to open knowledge is innovators and startups, when they are trying to apply for, trying to, a group of innovators is trying to do the startup or trying to start a new project where they're seeking venture funding. And many of the sources of funding actually punish when you want to open up and open how you doing the things, and open your methods, and open I don't know why investment has been paired in the last 15 years with closed innovation, you know, like you have to keep secret, your secret sauces, your secret, like, you know, methods and so on. And what the result of this is innovation in entire sectors. If you think how we need, for example, green technologies now, are completely closed because of the lack of incentives of people opening up so they can be sustainable. A way that we are working towards, you know, unlocking that problem is that we are trying to make many initiatives that are right now at the UN level on digital public infrastructure that will be at least addressing all the needs of the public sector in terms of digital. We are trying to push that this is open by default and by design as a way to separate the incentive of funding with closeness. If one of the requirements for all the digital infrastructure and for all the knowledge that is being produced by certain institutions is open by default and open by design, we will overcome this obstacle. Another example is of difficulties with opening knowledge is what is the permanence of such open knowledge available for others. And that is very interesting because if you look at the early open knowledge, open education and open culture initiatives, now it's a cemetery of broken links and outdated websites. So one of the challenges of communities that try to open up and keep archives alive and online and open to everyone is precisely that maintenance. We saw in Latin America, for example, many progressive governments that were very supportive of open education resources. And then when the government changes, of course, all this content is scrapped and vanished. So for this particular problem, we haven't found, there's no institution to go, there's no place to look into that will, like, you know, like collaborate in the less attractive bits of keeping the knowledge commons, keeping the open knowledge up and alive and accessible to everyone, because it's things like hosting, things like maintenance, things like deploying certificates that we haven't sorted out. I think that what you are doing at the GEO community is very interesting because you are actually enabling a basic infrastructure for everybody to share and committing to keep it alive. I think that we need more like vehicles like that to keep our communities going. I hope that I answered your question, Leona. It is not, it's the hard sides of open knowledge, not the easy examples, but I think that this community is great to share them in this community because there are concerns in the long term, and at large scale.
I think that this is why I was saying that we try to develop openness as a mindset, because I think that we are in a very competitive world. Most of us went through a competitive process for our education. And so we have to relearn about being open and sharing, I think. Bente, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you all speakers. It's been really, I'm very excited. I think we got a very good material also to share with those who are not with us today. I have a concrete question to Ken, and actually it was, I think, strengthened by what you said, Renata, of some of the challenges related to being open. Because Ken, I was, of course, it's an impressive number of activities that you have been organizing, but coming back to the topic of the day, the overarching goal of the open knowledge statement, and I'm wondering, was it useful? Has it been useful for you when you are implementing all these different activities that we have this overarching goal of openness? I mean, this statement, this goal that we have, you know, the reason why we have open knowledge, has that been useful, or has it been difficult for you to make the communities accepting this openness?
Oh, thank you for the question. It has been deliberate because technically the data we're providing is also free and open data as well. Of course, when you engage with different countries, especially the space agency or the military or the governments, senior governments, they're a bit skeptical because they actually like wondering, everything is free. Oh, so what is the catch? So it's just move the buying, tell them that we've actually been funded by other governments in the developed world to help in the developing countries. So it's more of a value proposition that once they come on board, we're able to co-develop the work we are doing, actually not doing the work for them, empowering them so that they can actually unlock the potential in different countries. And also the work that we provide, the support, like different countries can be a little bit different because like in Ghana, when you talk about illegal mining, it's not very good at a high political class. But then when you change the narrative and it's more of regulated mining as well as supporting the initiatives in terms of land degradation, the government now is more keen now to actually see how they can actually use it for that value instead of actually providing a tool which is policing the delivery of a government.
I have a question to Marcus, because we can understand the value proposition for countries and for organizations like the Open Knowledge Foundation, but can you help us understand or help the audience understand the values of open knowledge for a company like yours? Because 52 North, you said, are trying to implement and push open knowledge as much as possible. In our community around in OGC, I see 52 North as a very successful company organization. So can you tell us all the benefits you get from this approach?
Yeah, so it is a bit like if you have like a company like 52 North, then you need to have a bit of idealistic values behind that. So because you need to have a bit of an understanding of what open science means and what it means for your actual work. So it's not just about understanding policies, but being able to apply that to your work on a daily basis. And also to develop a business model at the end, because just by doing open science projects, this would not work. So we also need to have these kind of professional services. We call it professional services, where we also make a bit of revenue. But this is the money that we spend for applying for research projects. And following open science principles is basically the agenda that we set in our company. So there are also geospatial companies around us that have more like a commercial background. But it's basically our, I need to say that again, it is a bit of the idealistic idea to follow these open science principles in research projects. And we also select research projects based on openness.
Yeah. So I think that implementing open knowledge is also a matter of imagination a little bit, because you can share, even if you do not share everything, you can share much more than we usually share. For instance, I'm trying to advocate that if your business is relying on real-time data, maybe you can open your data when it's older, when it's 5 years or 1 year or 6 months older, and then it can be reused for climate change impacts, which are so important for our world and the next generations. So I think that we have to encourage also private companies. Of course, everyone has to get funds from somewhere, and governments cannot support for free the sustainability of everyone. But there are ways to rethink your business model to see, okay, this is my business model. This is where I do the money. What can I open out of that? And when can I make my products maybe open and shared by all? Or maybe can I make piece of it, the science open, maybe not the product, but the science which is in it, and rethinking, reviewing that regularly, I think can be a way also to share more than we do currently.
Yeah, and the people that we work with, so we work a lot with universities, they come to us and ask for the development of some kind of a piece of software, and then they also know what they get. So we publish most of our work is published on an open license. So we wouldn't get a request, yeah, develop a piece of software, but please keep it closed. So this would actually not happen.
So what GEO is doing, and is very interesting with the Open Knowledge Hub, is to deliver not only pieces of knowledge, not only data, only software, but packages which are consistent and make all that reusable, because the goal is also the reusability. And if we can share things from one region to another region, it's also a way to develop business in other places. I have seen because sometimes you need some consistency local, even if you use open software. So this is just a way to develop a different business. Bente, you have raised your hands.
Yes, I raised my hand, and but I also want to encourage, don't be shy here, by the way, the audience, non-speakers, also those who are just attending. The floor is actually open for having a dialogue. This is what we want. I have a question for you, Renata, because Open Knowledge Foundation has been around, as you said, for 20 years. After that, I think, for instance, in the European Union, you see more policies towards openness. Is it linked? Are you in dialogue with the politicians at this level? And can you say something about what's happening in other regions than in Europe with respect to having more policies approved for openness?
Yes, like I will say that the European Union, both the US government and the EU and Latin America as a whole have been the best allies of openness. I think that the process was from grassroots, from a lot of efforts early on by grassroots, when governments and politicians did not quite how to react to digitization. Initiatives like Creative Commons, like the Open Knowledge Foundation, and so on, were very proactive in giving governments and giving international organizations a ready-made set of legal tools, basically, and policy tools to make open the default. It was great to do it very early on, because it was very easy to institutionalize this vision. And it stayed. It was enshrined in policies, in directives, and now is the default in most of the EU, in most of the US agencies, and in several countries in Latin America. So what happened, however, in the last 7 years, I would say like that, from a moment of grassroots push to a moment of mainstream and institutionalization, what happened a little bit is that the grassroots faded away. And many of the people who were advocating constantly for open standards, open licenses, open data, they kind of graduated from activism and moved on. And they are in many of the agencies, they are working on companies and so on, the community kind of faded away. And the push for openness is finding is very interesting. Many by new generation of activists is facing a push against, and that's why I in the overarching goals I made very clear that we are addressing the issue that has been raised by many communities of against data extractivism and exploitation and so on, because I will put you a very simple example. Things like pictures, where in a very naive way, put into the digital commons 10 years ago, like millions of pictures that were licensed with a free license, made available online. And what happened is that many companies that are not so ethical use those pictures for training AI systems that are used police, and was used by not necessarily the most ethical people. So what we are facing now, and what is very, very interesting, is now we have to stop for a moment and look at how the open definition define openness, and see whether we need to put like some constraints or some clarifications to the concept of open knowledge that will address the concerns of communities that are like starting to see openness as something that is not necessarily always good and always positive. And of course, that's a huge complication for communities like this one, but it is a concern that we feel from the Open Knowledge Foundation that we need to address. And the conclusion might be, we don't need to modify anything in our definitions, but we might need to reactivate the grassroots movement and explain why, for the reasons that I stated in my presentation, open is the best way forward, and as a way to update and activate the always necessary grassroots push that will make possible that the institutions that are already adopted open by default and so on in times of regression of rights will not go backwards and close the things if administrations change and if everything moves to a more conservative and closed mindset.
I think Paula is next. And you are muted, Marie-Françoise, in case you wanted to say.
Yes, I was thanking you, Renata, and giving the floor to Paula.
Thank you very much, and extremely interesting presentations and discussion. I have a question for Renata for the Open Knowledge Foundation. I know you don't know yet enough about GEO, but where do you see our concrete collaboration with you? Do you see some priority lines that for which you like to engage?
Yes, happy to answer, because it's very clear, like it's in the community. It's absolutely in the architecture of the community you form is something that is very replicable and scalable, and in the community itself, like not only in the model, but in the community itself. Because as I was saying, we're struggling, like the concept got mainstream and got institutionalized, but we cannot lose the community and the grassroots efforts and the concrete examples from volunteers and from from collaborators distributed everywhere. And I think that's the point of connection, because we can show people in the majority of the world, like not necessarily from the G20 economy, so we can show countries, for example, from the Vulnerable 20 coalition, that there's a lot to gain from opening and a lot to gain from open knowledge that is precisely the vehicle to address the most pressing problems of our times. It is not a nice to have anymore. It's almost like the only way we can scale fast enough so to deliver the solutions and to deliver the knowledge communities need to to guarantee that humanity as a whole will continue for some more years around. And communities, the work that your communities is the concreteness of the benefit of the communities that you convey is something very valuable for Open Knowledge Foundation, but it is also a perfect ally to update and refresh what we stand for, and check in if it's still if it still covers the vision of sharing knowledge for all that we have.
Thank you very much, Renata.
Yeah, may I just jump in? So Renata, so this community here, for instance, around the dialogue series, is sort of addressing the core of what I see as core of GEO, namely the open data sharing, the open and management principles, and now moving on to open knowledge. I think these are core communities, and we have seen, just to let you know, that even though we have many different active communities, it's having to maintain a community and to how do you say, aggregate more members to a community is actually hard work. and I don't know, yeah, you're nodding, yeah, I guess you have the same experience. So sharing, for us to share this, both the experience and to share the communities, because I mean, you see, we have been using your definition, we have been referring to you without even having been in contact with you directly. So I think there's and as you're describing, I wasn't aware of that actually, that this activism on open knowledge or open sharing is on retreat, even though I do recognize the words of exploitations, and there's some contradictions there, wanting to be open but at the same time protect themselves from being protected. I recognize that, but all the same, I mean, since we are sharing a vision, it might be possible to create synergies in this when it's demanding to maintain communities. I don't know your views on that.
Yeah, I want to clarify where this pushback is coming from. It's coming from many of the data privacy communities, because those communities are always presented to the most extreme case of data extractivism and very concrete stories of harm. And it is also coming from a group of people who think that, that the big tech companies benefited from and free rode from this absolute openness that we pushed earlier. And it comes also from many of the grassroots activists advocating for anti-colonial practices or decolonial practices, because they argued that this complete openness will just invite the knowledge from indigenous communities and so on to be expropriated and used to the benefit of the powerful actors. And I understand that, many of these communities are having their moment, and is the moment of maximum visibility. And because our efforts and our principles became standardized practices, it is a little bit like a fight against the established, even if it was created with a lot of effort and it went with the best intentions of maximizing knowledge equality. I want to make this community aware of those tensions at the moment, because it comes from very specific communities that if they see this example, they will say okay, but we cannot generalize, and actually those cases of abuse in the frame of openness are just the exceptions and not the general rule. The general rule is that it is educators, it is libraries, it is people willing to share culture and so on. So I am glad that I was able to share this. There's not necessarily a happy, impactful story, but it's something that is the pushback from the new people that we are facing, and that's also the part of the interesting part of this alliance, that we can bring you closer to the hot topics as well, because for example, in Africa and in parts in Asia, new AI developments They don't want to open the models or open the data sets that they're using to train because of these arguments when it is in the public interest. So it's this paradox and this contradiction that we are facing now that is very interesting to engage with. And another issue that I wanted to address that I think is very important is sustainability. We need to advocate very strongly in this new digital public infrastructure discourse, not only to make it open, but that communities are an essential part of digital public infrastructure of any kind. If you think of geo data as essential part of digital public infrastructure that we will need in the next 50 years, the community behind also needs to be computed and considered and funded accordingly. And I think that, for example, it is very hard, not when it's new and hot topic, but 10 years later, you know, knowledge repositories and collaborative efforts lose the funding and then they fade away, you know, and then you just find a dead link with an error. And I think that the sustainability of open knowledge is one of the key issues that we haven't addressed completely and that we need to fight for in the next few years.
I can then just refer you to, we had a speaker from NASA, Thomas Huang, and he was, NASA is actually, they are using open software for activities. And what they are looking, what their quality test was, is there a big enough community around that open software to make it, you know, so sustainable? It's exactly that point you say, that you need large communities around Linux, for instance. You know, you need these communities. That's what you're referring to, right? That you have this, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the actions we have discussed about is to write down the value proposition for GEO, but it's also for the activities of GEO, including this data sharing. And listening to you, Renata, I think that we would save time if we not only write a value proposition, but something like a SWOT analysis with the, you know, with the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that combines all these aspects of what you want to advocate and push. And we would save time explaining, yes, we know that if we open data, maybe the GAFAs will be the one who benefits the most, but it also gives the opportunity to small companies to access amounts of data they would never be able to buy. And so it creates an ecosystem which is much richer than not just having some companies leading the world. So I don't know, maybe we will have to think about, it's a discussion to open in GEO, not only this value proposition, but a type of SWOT analysis to save time maybe and discussions. To know, okay, we are not just idealists. We know that there are some objections. And this is why it's important also to have the vision from companies like Marcus said. I'm sure it's not easy in a daily approach, but again, the statement, the GEO statement you have written gives a portfolio of approaches to this open knowledge, which is rich enough, I think, for everyone to find a way to share something. And we have seen with Ken that it is expected, it is useful, and this is the discussion we want to push after these dialogues within GEO and our group, is how can we implement and push that further?
You saw that, Marcus, you showed explicitly the care principles, which we have been, you know, last year we were discussing the data management principles and comparing the GEO management principles with fair, care, and trust. So we did a comparison and found that they are complementary to a large degree. And so the care principle specifically addresses some of the issues of indigenous people to take care of, you know, this personal and individual interest or ethical interest. So the care principles related to Earth observations is actually a tool, if you like, that we can use. Even though we have sort of I wouldn't say a conundrum, but you know, a potential contradiction, internal contradiction inside GEO, because GEO has this indigenous geo-indigenous alliance where, as you've described, some of these issues of sharing without getting something in return is sort of opposite to the very foundation of becoming a part of GEO, which is open data sharing principles. So, you know, there's a balance that that I think what you said, Marie-Françoise, to do a SWOT analysis might be very helpful. And now with the dialogue series, I think we have lots of material to fill such a SWOT analysis.
Yeah, we have seen talking again about inclusiveness and diversity of knowledge. We already had some presentation last week about how listening to fishers enable UNEP to develop some applications that were far better than only done by scientists. So again, we see through all our European projects that co-design is also something which is very much developing. It is because this way to include and be open is a source of richness. So there is, in the past, I like to end some presentations with the ideogram, Chinese ideogram, which represents the crisis. The word crisis, or the concept of crisis in Chinese, is the connection of two ideograms. One is risk and the other one is opportunities. And this is exactly what we have here, I think, is that we need to show, identify which are the benefits and show that we know the risks. But there are very few things in our life where you have no risks. So you just have to know them and manage them and go towards what you think is potentially more, has a better potential at the end. So this is what we want to try to push here. Any question or anything you would like to add to the discussion? Marcus and Ken has disappeared. I think he's still here, but yes, he's still here. Or Paola or Felipe, well, any of the people in the audience, any question? Just enjoy this amazing panel.
While you are thinking, Ken, I was going to ask you, did you encounter any of this reluctancy because of the fear of exploitation in your activities?
What I mentioned earlier on was whatever is free, they are also not keen to share also what they could have that could value to us in terms of open data. So that means we have to invest more times in terms of country visits and also understanding the data ecosystem. For example, in Senegal, the ecosystem is more on SDGs, like in French, ODD. So better understanding and more engagements give us an idea to actually see their partners within this ecosystem who actually have not been talking to each other. And once one of them is able to share data, we were able to see how we could actually do a whole impact story on like leg gears in Senegal, partners, coming together. So it's more of there's that fear that everything is free could be maybe something like trying to spy on them as well. Like if you receive a link to download something for free, it could come to your machine and maybe, or those who use Android and Apple kind of stories. So it's more of assuring them that we are here for the long haul and we are part and fit into their national development agenda as well, and we are more inclusive. We are doing like the language in English, and then we're able to the trainings develop them in French or even in our meetings. And now even in East Africa, recent engagements in Zanzibar has been that we have to speak Swahili because of the context of people, because of that diversity. Diversity is power, because then once you understand how things are done, be able to encourage and connect with more communities, and these communities hold a lot of local knowledge, like this story we had with the giraffes. The communities were actually speaking Swahili in the interviews, and even it came on BBC that they gave us a story of what actually happened 50 or even 100 years ago was something coming back. So climate change is a reality that we need that local knowledge, which is only possible that understanding and investment, because I know most people are very keen to have impacts like within a few months or so, but it takes some time. Good things take time. Thank you.
Well, it's good to see this language discussion coming back because you said you develop everything in English and French. I think it's a big investment. I know that several academies, online academies in Europe are considering also to develop in several languages, because we know that English can be a barrier to many. So I really congratulate you to have go over this step and done it. We could see now Said, who was online and now he has gone, who was asking if there was an online translation in French, transcript in French. So meaning that even if you have the motivation, because he was here online, the language can be a barrier. And so we will have to consider that, I think, maybe in some critical documents for GEO maybe. And this is the case in WMO. There are 6 official languages. And I think it's not the case at the moment in GEO. I know it will be a hard topic to push because it's a matter of resources all the time.
But our approach in GEO, I think, has been, we have been divided into 6 regional areas. And part of that was to be, closer to where you are implementing the principles, closer to the people there. And I think maybe the regional GEOs is the where we were doing this, we were asking about them. We found out that language, in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion, is a working group in GEO. And we did an interview with people from around all the globe, and language actually turned out to be one of the challenges, as you said. And it's a matter of trust also. And even I can tell in Norway, and then probably for you, Marcus, also Netherlands, we are quite literate. I mean, we master English. Many of us master English very well. But when it comes down to, I know this, I worked at the that I did the mapping authority specifically. There was people, even though they understand, taking the floor and asking questions, etc., in another tongue than their own mother tongue is challenging for many people, even if they master English very well. So I think it's just to say that it's not just for those who doesn't speak necessarily English across the population. It's when it comes down to it, it's people are not feeling so secure in another language.
Renata, do you hear that in all the committees where you contribute?
Yeah, we were launching this early in this spring, rethinking the open definition. And if you go to the open definition website, you will see that it's in so many languages. The translation was provided by volunteers and the dialogue was fostered by volunteers. We try, it's very, again, it goes to sustainability, to make any initiative truly inclusive in terms of language. It is very, very, very expensive. And then it is when relying on these people like I call bridge people, trying to localize the initiative and trying to translate part of the stuff and make it available to the communities, and in 2 directions. These kind of people become like the champions of open knowledge, basically. But I guess that one of the things that I'm thinking about more recently is that while we have the technology to kind of in the near future fix these problems, if you look at all the simultaneous translation software, again, it is shaped by the languages that we have the largest data sets from. So instead of finding a solution, we're like kind of replicate, even with the latest technologies, we are not fixing the problem. So I guess that can be like, a double, to truly fix this problem, we will need to advocate a double way, to advocate for like a better, like, recognition and even compensation to these bridge people that are doing the effort to reduce the barriers in these communities, and at the same time really truly advocate for the systems making conversations available for everyone in the future to be at least more than just the six most prominent languages in the world.
Even between computer systems, language and semantic is a challenge. OGC is working on a definition server to support interoperability between systems, because when you want to combine data that come from different words, you can have different terminologies and so on. And we have to advocate that open knowledge and interoperability, which is what we want to reach also when to support decisions like SDGs and so on, requires resources. It requires time. I have met several times people, researchers, saying, yes, I could publish my data into a portal because it's open, but this requires 2 days work, and I'm not sure I will have them. So it requires time, it requires resources, money, technology that is not still here. So the transcript and automatic transcript and translation are improving a lot. And this will probably be very valuable tool to make the science and knowledge available in different languages in an acceptable way very soon. But it requires still time and skills, and some people, as you say, that can help to review what is made automatically. So we need some, I would say, passeurs in French, people that help connect and check that the systems connecting together are good. I'm sure that all of us around the table here speak several languages. And this is why we are here, because we are able to communicate and work on this interoperability with diverse backgrounds and whatever, because we can speak English, which is not our native language for none of us, I think. So yes, it's the language is still something important, I think, that we have to work on and push and make people understand that this requires time and resources. But the benefits will be bigger. This would be, I think, this has to be the final word, I think, to this dialogue. We really hope, we would like to thank all of you, because it was great to have you around the table. We are very applied, Bent and I, and in GEO we try to be applied. It's not only about talking the principles. After this dialogue series, we will try to see how we can push these principles in application in GEO. So the dialogue next week will be about diversity of knowledge, but then the following one will be with representative, we hope, we are still trying to gather the speakers, but representatives from the different regions to see how this can apply to the different regions, because we know that when you go to the people, you have specificities, and we want to support cross-fertilization between the different regions and what they do and what they approach, and encourage them to share more, benefiting and seeing what are the needs and what are the uses and how it is implemented in the different regions. So please keep on following the dialogues. Then we will implement an additional one, which will be the very last. We are discussing with Lionel about the self-assessment tool to see if it's worth to make a last dialogue on that or not. But we will announce that very soon. Thank you very much to the audience. Thank you to the speakers. And stay tuned and join us, Renata. I think in GEO, Marcus, I understand you are familiar with GEO. If you have written this statement that is such a driver for us now, Renata, I hope you will join some working group. We wait for some follow-up.
Yeah. We have pinpoint one specifically for you, just saying.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. As I said, like in this discipline of hope, your community really made our week at the foundation. So.
Oh yeah, we are very happy to meet you too. It's for us too, right, Paula?
I love the word discipline of hope. That's what they're not the easy part, but that's where we need to go. Absolutely.
We could create a hope working group.
Hope working
group.
Why not? Yeah.
We will find a meaning to this acronym.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can. Absolutely. Thank you. Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye bye.